Welcome back to Yanks Abroad Bleacher Report stream. We did one late last night after the Mexico match. If you want to go watch that, feel free. I'm Casey Settleman. I'm with my co-host from Croatia, I believe, Will Balsam. And today we are talking about the U.S. men's national team best starting 11. I feel like this is a fitting time to speak about it. Well, kind of a fitting time, we didn't see half the players that'll potentially be there after this first Pochettino camp. But yeah, that's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk with some of the injuries and then just an ideal 2026 fully fit squad, what that will look like. And if you enjoy any of this content, we cover everything U.S. men's national team over on our YouTube channel, Yanks Abroad. So after this, feel free to head over there and hit the subscribe button, check out some of the content. But Will, you luckily, as it was 5 a.m., middle of the night for you.
The match was at 4 a.m. For me. So
you luckily didn't get to watch that performance last night. My biggest takeaway was that there weren't a ton of learnings from outside of the fact of something we kind of touched on recently is like this new gen of young players is very exciting, but there's not going to be a ton of them that make a real impact on the World Cup starting 11 to 16 spots that are really going to impact our results for the most part. So that's why there's no reason to overreact to last night. But the one person, I guess, where we start is in goal, Matt Turner. He started both matches under Pochettino. You didn't get to watch last night. I didn't get to watch the first game. Is he your starting goalkeeper for?
Yeah, he's the starting goalkeeper. I spoke about it quite a bit in the post-match after the first match. It's like the shot stopping. We know Matt Turner he's a pretty good shot stopper. He's not the most elite, but he made a great double save in that first match. He's consistent. He's mostly gets to the shots that you think he should save. There was that one, obviously, in Copa that we debated a lot. It seemed like he was injured prior to that. So it's not clear if we're going to blame him for that one shot. But we both agree he probably saves the one that Horvath let in off of his hands. He's a good reaction goalkeeper. But so many times he gave away free possession when he had the ball at his feet and either kicked it long and he kicked it out of bounds. Like, didn't even give his team a chance. Or we did a goal kick routine where McKenzie put it down, passed it to Turner, who was supposed to just make a simple pass to Tim Ream, and he just passed it directly out of bounds, like on the ground out of bounds. And, I mean, that's going to be very frustrating. He is the starting goalkeeper right now. There's really no question about it. I mean, no one else is getting a look in, and that makes sense. The other options are definitely worse. So Matt Turner is our best goalkeeper right now, but we will talk about this, I'm sure, up until the World Cup and through the World Cup at why this is so frustrating that we can't even just have the a position that's really been one that the U.S. has been very good at for a long time, looking back at Tim Howard and obviously even before that, Brad Friedel, players who have succeeded in England in that position. And Matt Turner isn't even playing club football right now. So he's on the bench, obviously, for Crystal Palace. But yes, he is the starting goalkeeper for me. I assume you feel the same.
Yeah, I agree. I think did you see the Jimenez free kick from last night?
Yes.
Yeah. So he gets a hand to it. And in the recap last night, I said, there's no one in the U.S. men's national team camp, obviously including Turner because he didn't make the save, that makes that save. So I don't think it should be held against him. But what I will say is he gets a hand to it. There are many elite goalkeepers in the world who actually do make that save. As good as that free kick was, and I don't want to take anything away from Jimenez because he looked like prime Luis Suarez.
Yeah, he's back. He's playing well for Fulham too. He looks really good.
So I'm not taking anything away from him. But it goes to show that set pieces, especially, I mean, you're not going to see many free kicks like that, but they can make the difference, especially in a big tournament. And we don't have a world-class or anything close to it shot stopper. So we're going to have to get used to the fact that this is kind of our reality. And Matt Turner is unfortunately, for better or for worse, probably for worse, our starting goalkeeper for at least the next 2 to 3 years, unless someone comes out of the woodwork, which would be obviously fantastic.
The idea is it's Gaga Slonina. That is the concept. That is the thought. That is the dream. Obviously, he's playing every match for Barnsley right now. So, we hope that that's going well. They don't get international breaks in League One. So It's kind of a tough one where if you're pulling him away from the team, he can miss 2, 3, 4 matches. Right. I mean, League One, they're playing 2 matches.
They pack them in.
So,
yeah.
So it's like, would you rather him get the club experience right now? Probably. In the year leading up to the World Cup, when he isn't in a League One club, hopefully we're calling him up and he's getting his opportunity. But it does look like Matt Turner. I see in the chat, TH12_. Heisman. I think that's kind of the name. Yeah, I think Casey and I spoke a lot about this when Pochettino was hired. Joe Scally is going to struggle in this system a lot because he is not comfortable getting up that wing. He is not comfortable, basically playing the full length of the pitch the way Pochettino wants his wingbacks to. And so what we saw is in possession, they're going into a back three where Scally's coming in as the right center back. You have your right center back as the center back, and then Ream as the left center back. And it's kind of 3-4-2-1 in possession. And so yeah, Scally's not really that comfortable as an inverted right back either. He is a very, very traditional right back. But right now, it's his position, and it's not Marlon Fossey. We're not going to want to watch Marlon Fossey there. I think Brian Reynolds should get a shout in the next international break. And I got a lot of stick for this on our podcast a few weeks ago, almost a month ago, when I said Richie Ledesma, who's been kind of converted to a right back at PSV, I'd like to see him get a chance under Pochettino against some lesser opposition. He's obviously not a defensive right back at all, but he's somebody who can do a job and do the kind of things Pochettino likes. He's a true right winger, so he can get up the pitch. And I think it'd be interesting. But right now, Joe Scally kind of our only option at right back. You agree?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think he's playing in a position where, like, in the Mönchengladbach side, he was playing a lot of right wing back, which is even more forward than obviously a traditional right back, and then he's playing out of position at right center back. Yes, he looked awful last night, but he was actually one of the only players who we gave a ton of praise to from Copa. So I think we can't forget about that. The amount of talented left wingers in that tournament, not that he came against all of them, but when we played Brazil in the friendly, he looked relatively comfortable against Vinny. So I think we can't forget how he did at a traditional right back position when he moved to right center back. But yes, I still believe Scally is the right back. And then obviously when fit, Dest obviously steps right back into the squad. Could be the second or third most talented player in the squad. So the big conversation is center backs. So Ream, I actually thought was one of our better players last night. He obviously got caught a little lazy on the ball. Jimenez slide tackle leads to the second goal. But that is, for me, not something you want to see from one of our veteran players, because that's something you, in theory, should see from a young, inexperienced player. So that was not great. But again, it didn't look like his lack of pace or whatever it may be was a big problem last night. Jimenez actually had him on the break, caught up, and actually made a really good tackle that ended up leading to that goal when he came back and slide tackled. But for me, I go McKenzie, Ream. After watching Miles Robinson last night, he was not first to a single ball in the air on set pieces. That was a huge concern last night. So those are my two center backs. I'm curious if you have something different.
Well, I mean, assuming Chris Richards is back in November, obviously one of those positions is his. I think at the World Cup, I just do think Ream is going to be too old. I think right now he still is fine, but I just think you see it like, especially, and this is something I really forgot about Pochettino as a manager, because the attacking football can be so attractive that you kind of forget about some of the other elements. Yeah. But when he plays that double pivot, and I talked about this a lot on my recap after the first match, it leaves a lot of space between the midfield and the center backs. And so with Ream's kind of slower pace at this age, never been the fastest, but obviously he's lost a step. And McKenzie, I thought, didn't really look like his recovery pace was quite like what we're used to with Chris Richards or obviously Anthony Robinson. There was so much space to exploit there, and Tim Ream is going to struggle in that position. And so I think until we nail down that midfield and center back partnership and the communication is there, it's going to be really tough with Tim Ream. I'd like to see Richards and McKenzie get a chance together in November. I think Richards will be healthy by then. Hopefully he'll have played again for Crystal Palace before then, because they may be very careful with him if not. But for me, Richards and McKenzie is probably the center back pairing that I think is most likely at this point to be at the World Cup in 2026. Again, I think Ream still does a job, and I think he'll be in the squad continuously. But I just think the way Pochettino plays, you need guys who can cover space, especially when we drop into that three at the back in possession. You need guys with recovery speed. And I'd expect the two of them to be the ones to play together. And we've seen it with McKenzie. I mean, I remember we were watching the friendly in September, like his left foot passing range is pretty extreme for a right-footed player. So he can definitely do a job there.
Definitely. Didn't obviously want to forget about Richards. It's something we've talked about extensively. He's first name after Pulisic on the team sheet when he's fit. So Chris Richards definitely is in there. I'm hoping Tim Ream is our Pepe to Portugal, and he somehow stays fit enough and can do the job at the World Cup. I mean, you look at Pepe, he was keeping some very, very talented younger Portuguese center backs out of that starting lineup at the Euros. Now, Do we have a Gonzalo Ignacio in our system waiting to come start? Absolutely not. But I'm hoping
Joshua
that Ream,
Winder.
yeah, there we go. I'm hoping that Ream can keep it together. I would like Richards Ream. But yes, we'll obviously see. And then on to left back, I mean, another underwhelming performance for me, but that was the entire team was awful, so you can't really pinpoint exact performances, I thought, except for Brendan Aronson and Aiden Morris, who we'll get into further up the pitch, who I thought were absolutely awful. But yeah, it's Jedi and, I mean, Wiley again. We keep flirting and making because he got the move to Chelsea, but like he never plays. No one wants to play him in any sort of situation. So clearly he doesn't. Clearly he's not the guy.
Yeah.
So it's Jedi's position, and it's not even close, frankly.
Well, you got to wonder, like, obviously the Wiley signing was after Pochettino left, but it's not like they were, these players that they sign, young players for the clubs. It's
They're
not
tracking
like these.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been tracking Caleb Wiley. So you have to assume Pochettino knows a little bit at least about Caleb Wiley. You do think he's the backup when he's fit. The way he's been playing at Strasbourg, he's been pretty good. But yeah, Jedi is the left back. And I really thought it was interesting with him because, again, I do agree he's not quite playing up to those levels he's playing at Fulham for the U.S. men's national team. But the couple of times that he was able to get super wide and really keep the width and be way out there on the wing, it led to our first goal in the match against Panama. He received the ball excellently, used his pace, used his strength, his physicality, and his ability to play the ball low and hard on the ground to get it into the box to create that goal. The issue is when he has to drift a little bit more inside to pick up the ball, it's just not – he doesn't work there. He doesn't feel comfortable eating up space. Even when there's nobody around him, he makes bad decisions. So it's really going to be about him getting comfortable, being super wide, and letting Pulisic come into the half spaces. And Anthony Robinson should thrive in this system with those low hard crosses.
That's a very interesting point because with the current setup, we don't know if this is what Poch is going to move forward with, but it was Yunus Musa out at right wing back in possession and Anthony Robinson out at left wing back, and he was getting touchline very high, and that's obviously where we want him to live. And the dynamic when it's Robinson and Pulisic on that left side rather than what I watched, which was Robinson Aronson, is obviously going to be very different. Now, again, when we have a forward-thinking right back, I would assume he's going to go back to just that in possession, that traditional 4-2-3-1, and just let Dest and Robinson get up and down. But if we end up playing the 5-back in possession, I think that obviously fits him extremely well with the way we talked about Pulisic coming inside, the way he naturally wants to anyways. It's just I'm going to keep saying it until he proves me otherwise. Like, he disappoints every single time with the U.S. men's national team, and in theory, he should be he's our veteran. He's been in this side literally forever. He should be performing.
Player who's top 3 at their position in the Premier League, and he can't perform.
It's
very surprising.
Insane. And it's not like he's like people say Foden is a result of the City system, can't perform outside of the Pep system. It's not like he's playing for Man City. He's playing for Fulham. It's a lot of up and down, not dominating games.
For Fulham under multiple managers. This is not under a one. It's not just under Marco Silva. He was good prior under Scott Parker. He's been good for many years.
So
he got until he does it, Marco Silva, but
until he does it for the U.S. I'm going to, I guess, stay optimistic. If you watched the stream last night, I apologize for the negativity I gave off, but I was not very optimistic about the outlook after last night's performance. It was late, but yeah, that's the ideal back five. I mean, I don't know how ideal is, but I think this is the biggest conversation. This midfield. I'm not sure. You don't see it as much, the dynamics in the midfield in the highlights, and I obviously didn't get to watch the first match. I watched the full 90 of this past match. Our midfield looked atrocious. Buzio, very sloppy, looked a little lost in his positioning, and Aiden Morris, I thought it was a bit of an atrocity, honestly. And then Yunus Musa was out on the right side, kind of out of position in possession. So I'm curious what you think the best midfield is.
Yeah, so I'm not totally shocked about Yunus Musa at right mid. I don't know if you remember, but I was saying prior that about Musa, like, he's played a lot out of the wing. That's where he played as an academy kid. That's where he started at Valencia. He was a right mid and then kind of a pseudo right back. And so I knew that Pochettino would want some help on that right side defensively. So I thought Musa and Weah made sense there because Weah's played a little right wing back for Juventus as well. Guys who understand defensive responsibility. That pivot was so horrendous in both matches of Aiden Morris and Buzio. And I want to blame some of it on the fact that the two of them have never played together. But it really was hard to watch. I mean, in the first 20 minutes, I will say the Panama match, they actually looked pretty good. But once Panama grew into the game and got more comfortable and found that space that I'm talking about between the midfield and the center backs, they just kept
it was the
exploiting
exact
it.
same thing last night. The first 10
Yeah, I
minutes,
saw it on the second goal, too.
we dominated possession, and then after that, like I thought it was going to be like, oh, we're going into Mexico, and it's just assumed we're going to dominate again. Like tides have really turned, and then after 10 minutes, we were atrocious. So it's funny that you said it was literally the exact same thing. The one thing I will note, which is interesting, is I feel like it's a difficult. You're a little isolated, as you kind of touched on, and it's a little difficult, I think, maybe to adapt. Like we saw when Caicedo was brought in, he was awful.
That's exactly
to begin with. And he really grew into that position and was kind of one of the better midfielders in the entire Prem towards the latter part of the season. So that may be the most demanding and difficult position to learn in. So maybe we need to cut them a little slack, and naturally players will grow into it. Or Buzio and Aiden Morris just should never be getting into our midfield to begin with.
Well, I think it's a little bit like the issue with a double pivot is no single midfielder has the responsibility of being the defensive midfielder, right? Like when you play with a lone six, that player knows if they take a risk, they're leaving a gap. When you play in a double pivot, you don't know when to take a risk. You don't know when you have cover. And so unless you kind of develop a dynamic with your partner, it becomes very difficult. And so I think, like we saw it with Caicedo, I think it wasn't just Caicedo. It was the fact that he was not familiar with who he was playing with. He was brought in at the end of that transfer window, if you recall, and then kind of thrown in because you spent 110 million pounds on a player. He needs to get thrown into the side. And obviously an incredibly talented player. I'm not comparing Aiden Morris and Buzio to Caicedo, but I feel like watching that, like it kind of like, a light bulb flicked on. I was like, yes, this is what happens with Pochettino in the first few months. The issue is this isn't club football. And so they're not going to play together for another month. So, interestingly enough, I think it'd be really cool to see Tessman and Buzio play together there because they did that at Venezia for a year in a double pivot. They both understand each other's games very well. I think Tessman's a little bit more defensive minded. I was pretty shocked at the way Aiden Morris looks in terms of his defensive acumen, like not even defensive acumen. He's usually such a good ball winner, but he did look very lost out there. To me, like you have to get one of our sixes in this pivot, and neither Morris or Buzio are true sixes. And somebody mentioned, why does Leonard Maloney not get any action? I don't know. I think Leonard Maloney could fit really well in this system. You put Maloney with Adams or Cardoso, or Maloney with Musa sitting in there as well, somebody with a little more athleticism. And I think that could work really well. Even Buzio, like I'm a big fan of Buzio. I thought he was okay in that first match. I thought Morris was pretty bad, but there are a lot of options for these two spots, and Pochettino's going to have to figure it out fast.
Did Tessman get time in the first match?
Yes.
So as a sub, I assume.
Yeah, he played like the last. So
he came on as a sub last night, and he wasn't called up originally. Like clearly, maybe Tessman just isn't in Poch's plans. Like the fact that he couldn't get more, it's just a tad bit concerning because then it all comes on Cardoso, who's never put in a good shift for the U.S., or Adams, who's been completely. Who's your everyone in the entire U.S. men's national team camp is fit? Who's your pivot in those positions?
I mean, I have two different ones written down. I really would like to see Tessman and Musa because I think that's really balanced, but it could also be a bit disastrous because they both like to be 100%. Adventurous at times. But in theory, you put a hardworking Musa who is a ball carrier, who is a dual winner with a Tessman who knows how to cover space, who can spray the ball, who's a deep lying playmaker together, and you put a Tillman in front of them in midfield. In theory, that's a really well balanced midfield, and it's very.
It gives me dire Dembele Dele Alli vibes. Like Dyer was very defensive and could spray it with both feet. And Musa, no one is Musa Dembele, definitely not Yunus Musa, but the way he carries the ball sometimes gives those vibes. I think Weston McKennie deserves a shot. The way he has played for Juventus, again, another year of him proving his worth at a big club. And I think he deserves a shot. I think something I touched on, I think it's very important how Poch is handling this squad, like sending people home, not calling people up with knocks. Like, I don't think we would have seen the care of our squad as a whole in past managers. Like, everything that happens, they said this on the broadcast last night, I thought it was a very good point, is everything that happens in the camps are very important because that's when you play with those players and under Poch. But that's very few and far between. It could be equally, if not more important, that these players stay fit and are consistently playing in their club teams. So I think the way Poch has been handling the squad, making sure everyone's fit, sending Pulisic home early, I think is something that we don't see that often, because I feel like U.S. managers feel the pressure more to get results, and they'll do whatever it takes, whether it's a friendly, whether it's Gold Cup, whatever it may be. Get results. Doesn't matter if we run this guy too much and he has a match at the weekend or whatever it may be. Like, he understood. It's escaping my head. Anthony Robinson has a match at Villa this weekend, so he takes him off. Pulisic needs to stay in just the care of this squad, I think, has been very important from Poch, and I think it's a refreshing take. And I said that all to say, obviously, that McKennie we didn't get to see, but I think McKennie deserves a shot in this midfield.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of slack for saying that I don't think Poch rates McKennie. It's not a matter of rating. I do think, in theory, it's hard to fit McKennie into this midfield if we're not going to play with a lone six. He does not want to defend the same way that some of those other guys want to. But I do like the idea of McKennie as a third man in the midfield in a match where you have Tillman, Pulisic, and Balogun as your front three. I like that idea.
And I think you can put Pulisic out on the right side.
100%. And you can put Tillman on the right side. When he was at Rangers, he played a lot on the right side. You can put McKennie at right wing if you want to as well, and Tillman through the middle. Like, they're all very versatile, so I think there is a role for Weston McKennie to play. And I hope Pochettino doesn't just play the same 11 every single match, because we're not a nation who can handle every opponent the same way. So it'll be important for him to get that right. But let's move on to number 10 and someone we're both excited for. And I know we both
real quick. I think we should answer before we move into the three behind the striker. Do you want to answer Tyler's question? He asked, will Adams ever reach the playing level we all envisioned before the injuries with Poch at the helm? My simple answer is no. We see this in every sport across every league, every age. If you're an injury-prone guy, it can stunt your career, and regardless of potential, regardless of quality you possess, people are injury-prone. That is unfortunately a thing, and he is one of those guys, and I don't think he'll ever get back to playing at full fitness. We kind of saw it with Derrick Rose. I feel like throughout his career, he was an MVP level player, and then injuries derailed his entire career. So my answer is no. I assume yours is no as well.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Adams was obviously incredible at Red Bulls. He was incredible at Leipzig. He's had moments at Bournemouth and a little bit he's played where he's been man of the match. His heat maps are always spectacles. The guy gets everywhere. He does not tire. I mean, even playing in the Copa America, he played pretty well considering his back was broken. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll ever reach the technical levels just because he's never had the consistency that we hoped that he would have in terms of playing. He obviously has a bit of magic in him. He had that great goal for Leipzig in the Champions League a few years ago during COVID, I think it was, where he scored a match winner. And obviously the amazing goal against Mexico in the Nations League final. But no, I don't think Tyler Adams ever reaches it. And I don't think he'll really be in consideration to start for this team in 2026. I think he'll be in the squad, but I just don't think he'll get consistent matches. And that's clearly important to Pochettino.
Yep. All right, you want to move to so let's get the left wing out of, Pulisic will start. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. So we don't really need to touch on it. I feel like we've talked about it extensively. I think I talked about it last night. We looked absolutely lost without him on the pitch. It's been very rare and few and far between that the U.S. has played. A lot of things have changed. Pulisic being in that starting 11 and being the focal point is one thing that has not changed often, and you saw the impact he really makes, and he's playing the best football of his career. So everything about Pulisic is amazing right now. And again, I think it's so smart by Poch. Send him home. What does Poch need to see with Pulisic? Like, we know everything.
100% agree.
It's not necessary. So the number 10.
I mean, we both feel the same way. It's got to be Malik Tillman. We've been saying it for months that he reminds us of Dele Alli in terms of his physical presence, his technical ability, both feet, goal scorer, goal creator, ball carrier, dual winner, second striker, everything about him. He's not just an attacking midfield. He's a bit of everything. He's anything behind the striker. He's going to eat that up and make something happen with it. And then Poch comes out and says the exact same thing. And so we know how he rates the player. I mean, it's that simple. You don't you don't compare somebody to Dele Alli in his prime the way Poch, made Dele Alli one of the best players in the world. Someone who was rumored to go to Real Madrid at 19, 20 years old, and then compare him to Tillman for no reason. So I think we're very excited about the fact that Poch sees what we see.
Yeah, and if by any chance you, that was the first time you watched Malik Tillman was last night. The only thing I can tell you is to do your best to try and remove that performance from your brain, because he was awful. And all I wanted to do after that match on the post is talk about how happy I was, because I've been making this comparison for so long. Poch finally said it, and then he played amazing. He played awful, but it was a result of how bad we were as a whole. We had no attacking chances, and he's a player that, very, again, similar to Dele Alli, if we weren't controlling the game well and getting him involved early and often, he can kind of phase himself out of the game a little. That's what happens with those types of player, that archetype of player. I don't even know what it would be called, but if he doesn't feel like he's getting super involved, showing his flair, getting touches on the ball, they can kind of just phase himself out of the game. So I wouldn't take that with too much. I think in a full strength lineup, he is the perfect number 10, and you believe it. It seems like Poch believes it, and I certainly believe it. So that's extremely
in his 15 minutes in the Panama match, he did exactly what we've been hoping for, which is he wins an aerial duel, ball comes down to his feet, he plays an incredible, basically one-time pass, breaking the lines, and it turns into a tap-in goal. Like that.
Yep.
There's no one else in the squad who does that. All of that in one player, nobody else in the squad. And so you need that when you're the United States.
Yep. All right. So honestly, this might be, other than center backs, well, the midfield, of course, right wing. Who's your right winger?
I mean, I think it's got to be Tim Weah. It's very convoluted, because I think the profile has to change depending on if Sergiño Dest is playing. Because if Dest is playing, you're probably having Dest way up on that right side often, or at least a more attacking inverted fullback. You need Dest in the final third. He is an incredible player in the final third. And so in that case, then I don't mind Yunus Musa on the right wing, because I think Musa can get the ball to feet a little bit more and create. But if it's not Dest, you need someone like Tim Weah who can has incredible ball retention, who can win a long ball and create something from it. We haven't quite gotten the goal contributions from Tim Weah for the U.S. that we kind of hope for, but Thiago Motta rates him, wants to play him a little bit more forward as a striker. He also has a defensive acumen, as I mentioned earlier, having played at right wing back for a little bit. I really like Tim Weah. You love Tim Weah. The country loves Tim Weah for getting Greg Berhalter fired. So I think that's his position to lose right now, but I wouldn't be totally shocked if we saw some Pulisic on the right wing and a little bit of Haji Wright on the left wing, because I think Haji Wright's been very impressive anytime he's gotten a chance.
That's what I was about to say. Someone mentioned it in the comments earlier. Does Haji Wright deserve a shot? And it's like, I think yes. What he does for club, he deserves a shot. He came on again in a sub appearance and brought a little bit of a spark to an absolutely dead performance against Mexico, which overall was just super disappointing that we went to Mexico and showed up with a lack of physical. Like everything we know that you need to travel to Mexico and play well, we just didn't show up with. But he came on, provided a spark, and he's an interesting inclusion if Tim Weah isn't giving us, like, I always say it, Tim Weah gives us a 7 out of 10 for the U.S. every single time, and I'll take that. And I also think his defensive acumen, as you touched on, he's played some right wing back for Juve, is very important when you have a Dest who we know would love to get forward, and being able to count on the fact that you have a veteran, experienced player who's willing to get back and defend could be an extremely important dynamic to allow Dest to play freely, because I think that's honestly one of the most important things for this U.S. men's national team is if Dest is thriving, it makes the entire team tick at a different level.
For sure. And I mean, I do think that right wing spot's very open. I think Kevin Paredes is a name that everybody, if you don't know Kevin Paredes, you need to know Kevin Paredes, because when he gets back and healthy for Wolfsburg, this is a kid who will make the World Cup squad and will try and make that right wing spot his own, because he's a very unique profile for this team that I don't think anyone else really does what he does.
Yeah, one thing I did want to mention before we get to the striker is Zendejas. Yesterday, he came on. I was actually pretty impressed with how he played. I've not watched a ton of him, granted, and I only got to see essentially 30 minutes of him. But one, he came on, got into a little scrap in a match against Mexico, which means everything. when no one else wanted to provide a spark and kind of get into it against the Mexican side. So I thought that was great. And he put in a brilliant ball to Christopher Lund, who he absolutely fluffed his lines from maybe 5 yards out. I was pretty impressed with him. So not that he's going to start, but I think he's a name worth mentioning after his performance is all. But finally, our striker position, I think we both agree, unfortunately, 2 months out, it looks like, for Balogun. But after his performances at Copa and how he's played overall for the U.S., Balogun's the striker every single day.
He's a no doubt number 9. Unfortunately, he will not be playing in November, so we won't see him for the U.S. again until March. So I do think we should just mention that somebody else can have to play striker, and it cannot be Josh Sargent. I know I sent you this, but I'm not sure everyone has seen this on Twitter. But here is the list of players who have scored for the U.S. men's national team more recently than Josh Sargent. Yanez, Gio Reyna, Nicholas Gioacchini, Sebastian Soto, Sebastian Leggett, Paul Arriola, Chris Mueller, Aya Akinola, Brendan Aronson, Jonathan Lewis, Jesus Ferreira, Miles Robinson, Serginho Dest, Pulisic, P. Falk, Weston McKinney, Daryl Dyke, Reggie Cannon, Sam Vines, Yossi Zardes, Shaq Moore, Matthew Hopp, Anthony Robinson, Ricardo Pepi, Tim Weah, Cole Bassett, Walker Zimmerman, Haji Wright, Jordan Morris, Brandon Vasquez, Alex Sendejas, Chris Richards, Fuller and Balogun, Mihailovic, Brian Reynolds, Cade Cowell, Busio, Tyler Adams, Luca De La Torre, and Yunus Musa.
It's essentially any player that has ever played for the U.S. more than 5 times has found a way to score, and he hasn't. Yeah, that obviously tells the entire story.
He just can't start in the Nations League in November. I'm sorry. He's been incredible for Norwich, and I've actually sat down and watched it because it surprises me to see my little phone tell me that Josh Sargent is scoring goals every week.
Yep.
And so I've been watching him in the championship, and he's been excellent. He's gotten into areas that he could succeed in, but for some reason it's not working for the U.S. You got to try someone else. Pepi has looked pretty good. He looked good in the 30 minutes against Panama. He deserves a chance. And Haji Wright.
Haji Wright deserves a chance at striker. It's the fact that he still had, again, Sargent was awful. Balogun's hurt. Haji Wright at the Nations League, we should see what he can provide at the striker position. I love his versatility of being able to play on the wings, but I'd love to see him get 70 minutes at striker in a competitive competition. It's time.
I also think Tim Weah potentially is going to play striker in November.
That could be interesting
if he's fit, because that's how Thiago Motta is going to be playing him. Yeah. So I don't know if Pochettino is going to be watching that and saying that. Lastly, should we answer this question from Tyler? What does Poch need to do to get this team to perform at a level that matches the talent level we now have? And I'm going to actually answer that question by posing you a question.
Yes.
Is there any part of you that believes that these players must just be exhausted? They had a full season. They had Copa America. Then they've had 2 international breaks.
Okay. My answer is that we are not that talented. We as Americans are arrogant and overly confident, and that includes myself. Will was the one going into Copa trying to tell me to level my expectations. I'm coming to terms. Our players are just not that good. It's not a Poch thing. I talked about this last night. Especially our depth. That was a big thing. Is we certainly don't have quality depth. So our starting 11 to 14 better show up or we're screwed. But I think our players are just not that good, and they got their performances. We kind of discussed this after their performances got hidden by the Berhalter out narrative, and they didn't have to take any flack for the performances. It was only Weah a little for the red card, but every performance got overshadowed by the Berhalter out. Now these players are going to get exposed. Berhalter is no longer there. It's Pochettino. There's no excuses. If these players don't perform, it'll fall solely on them. And I think a lot of U.S. men's national team fans are going to get their eyes opened to the fact that outside of Pulisic, Balogun when he's on, and Dest, and maybe Tillman, we don't have that many class players. It's just the reality of the U.S. men's national team setup, which is unfortunate because it felt like we were getting there. And I think we just all need to level as a collective that our players are not that good.
I totally agree. And I think the only way to do that is, I don't know if you saw what Leonard Maloney said, but he basically was like, yeah, I just have to work harder and I'll get into the team. And those are the kinds of players.
That's how you differentiate yourself.
Playing. Yeah.
100%. So to answer your question, what does Poch need to do? I mean, time is one thing, but 2, we as fans need to level our expectations. The performances and these players are only going to look so much better with Poch at the helm. We just don't have that great of players. And I think just one last thing. Brendan Aronson was not mentioned. I know Poch said he wants to find his best position. I'm officially done with Brendan Aronson, at least for the time being. He's still young, which is crazy because he's been in the setup for so long. But for the time being, I'm done with Brendan Aronson. There's a reason that neither of us brought him up in any discussion for any position when he seems to be a positionless player, so he could have fit into a couple categories, but he didn't fit into any for us. I'm out on Brendan. If people want to be in, go for it. He's Josh Sargent 2.0. They're dominating in the championship, but can't put in a shift for the U.S.
The only thing I'll say about Brendan Aronson is I will say he looked better than he had previously for the U.S. men's national team.
I mean, you can
yeah, a super sub's a strong word, Darren. I think Brendan Aronson.
Yeah, there's nothing super about him.
If you're winning and you want somebody to go bunny rabbit their way, running up the pitch and pressing for the last 15 minutes, Brendan Aronson can do that job for you. If you are chasing a goal, Brendan Aronson is not the guy. I think that's the differentiator.
Sure, but as we always talked about, we should be able to find players that can put in the same shift as Brendan Aronson and be quality footballers. We shouldn't have to settle for that. So I'm looking for, and one thing we talked about is with Poch, we're not going to get those lackluster effort performances. We got that last night, which was very disappointing to me. But yeah, that's our, you want to just recap the best 2026 starting 11? Just rip it off.
Best 2026 starting 11. Turner, Dest, Richards, McKenzie, Robinson. That's your 5 at the back. I went Tessman, Musa, Tillman as my midfield 3, and then Pulisic, Balogun, Weah as your front 3. To me, that's the perfect balance, skill level, talent, athleticism, and fitting the system.
If that is our 11, what is the expectation for the 2026 World Cup?
I mean, the expectation doesn't change no matter what the 11 is. Pochettino needs to get the 11 together that gets out of the group stage and at the very least goes out and tries to win a knockout match. I think we were all so frustrated at the last World Cup because, first of all, Josh Sargent started for some reason in that game.
Insane.
Jesus Ferreira started in that game. That was insane. But we also didn't go out and try to make anything happen. We just sat back and let it happen to us. And Poch isn't going to do that. We know that already. He's going to work. That doesn't mean go press 90 yards up the pitch. But it means trying to play some football. It means pressing on loose touches. It means winning second balls. And it means taking your chances when you have the ball at your feet. And so that's what we need to see in the knockout match. Hopefully we're winning one. And, you know, we're going to have the crowd behind us. So that should get the players riled up.
Completely agree. That is everything for this stream. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. And like we said at the top, we have our own podcast, YouTube and audio. Head over to Yanks Abroad on YouTube to find everything U.S. men's national team. We're the home for the U.S. leading up to the 2026 World Cup. We appreciate everyone tuning in. And we will be back on Bleacher for streams in the November camp. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And then in between, we'll have some player performance reviews of these U.S. men's national team players at their clubs on our Yanks Abroad YouTube channel. So be sure to check that out. And we appreciate you guys hanging with us.
See ya.